Taneja, partner at Lightspeed India, who I spoke with. They talk about how they are looking to invest in areas like consumer, fintech and deep tech, what the investment opportunity looks like in India. And do remember that Lightspeed has invested in unicorns like ShareChat, Razorpay as well as Udaan. Listen in. Rahul, thanks so much for taking time out. Let's begin by understanding a little bit about the investment thesis from Lightspeed, because it was in the year 2007 that you guys began investing in India, increased pace largely in the year 2011. Tell us a little bit more about how much has been invested so far, how much in the last 1 year, and a little bit more about your assets, what they're overall valued at for Lightspeed.
Thanks, Avanne, for having me on. Look, as you mentioned, we've been around now for 16 years in the region. And, we are passionate and long-term believers of, the value of the startup ecosystem here. In fact, it's only grown multifold since we've entered the ecosystem. I would say today we have invested upwards of $1.5 billion in the Indian startup ecosystem over the last few years. This has been across stages. While we primarily began as an early stage firm, today we are now a multi-stage, multi-sector sort of broad platform which invests, in pretty much every part of the startup economy. Currently, we are investing out of our most recent $500 million Fund 4. And, there are many interesting themes that we are investing in right now, which I'm sure we'll cover through the course of this interview.
Okay, so given the fact that India really holds a dominant place in the digital market, what kind of value generation is it that you see? Because there's a lot of focus from Lightspeed as well on generative AI. Give us a sense as to where India stands.
Right. I mean, look, India is pretty much the brightest spot if you were to evaluate, startup ecosystems across the world right now, due to a multitude of reasons, right? The first and the foremost of which is, the availability of high quality talent, and B, the fact that as an economy, we are digitizing pretty rapidly, right? So from our standpoint, we are currently looking at, let's say, 4 broad themes, which are driving our investments in the region. The first is, I think there is a very large and visible India to the world trend. Now, this is applicable both across SaaS, manufacturing, e-commerce, content, and multiple others. I mean, to give you a more recent example, we have a company called Pocket FM, which is building content for the US market for serialized consumption, building out of India. This is in content. I could give you enough SaaS examples, companies like Yellow AI or Axel Data. And then in the e-commerce or marketplace sort of examples, you could look at companies like MStack or Global Fair, which are building high quality supply chains for, sort of vertically specialized materials from India to the US and the other parts of the world. So I would say that one big theme for us over the last 18 months and continues to be pretty active is India to the world, spanning across sectors. The second theme I would say is local consumption oriented, especially, tier 3 and beyond. There are shining sort of examples of this in the ecosystem like Meesho, and, we are in fact now investing very actively against local consumption in this market. And the third, what you mentioned, which is AI, as a fund globally in the last 18 to 24 months, we've invested upwards of $1 billion behind different parts of the AI stack, starting from foundational models to applications and so on. So I think broadly speaking, these 3 or 4 things are pretty active investment areas for us today.
All right, give us a sense as to what the outlook is as well when it comes to the existing portfolio, looking at, the Agritech as a sector, in particular, B2B. How promising do you believe that overall ecosystem is? How are you looking at really early stage startups leveraging on the Agritech opportunity?
Right. Look, I think I will take you back to one of the themes that I mentioned, which is local consumption, right? Now, if you think about local consumption, there are, broadly speaking, three very large buckets in that. The first is about food. The second is about clothing or apparel, and the third is about residences or homes, or in a very loose manner speaking, I would say construction or real estate, right? From our standpoint as a fund, the first two buckets continue to be very rich and very fast growing areas of our economy. Both of them are outpacing the GDP growth in the country, and therefore, if you were to look at it top down from there, when you think about food, agri-tech automatically becomes very important. Now, fact of the matter is that these are not simple markets. The agri supply chain in our country is incredibly complex, and for a reason, which is historically infrastructure did not exist for easy transportation and exchange of agri goods across the country. Now, over the period of last, I will say, a decade or so, infrastructure has started improving, agri practices have started improving, and therefore we see a unique place for startups to operate in this, either for yield improvement for farmers or for better growth practices, or on the other side, which is on the sell side, which is better availability and pricing of goods moving from farm to your table, right? We have an interesting company called Vigro, which we've invested in, which is doing this for the fruits space in India and exporting. And then we have a company called Velocity, which is doing again the same agri supply chain solution for consumers of the Bharat audience, for vegetables. So we are passionate believers in this, I would say, and we believe this is going to be a long-term journey. We are at the very early stages of that, I would say. So we have at least a couple of decades of very, very high growth activity ahead of us on the agri-tech front. The other part that you spoke about was B2B commerce. Now, globally and in India, we are, I would say, almost very big believers in the franchise of B2B commerce. Globally, we have a firm called, as an example, we have a firm called Fair, which we've invested in, which is a very large, company solving for cross-border commerce. In India, we invested in Udaan and many others. Our belief is that whenever there is a complex supply chain which involves multiple actors on both the sell side and the buy side, there is value to be created by the creation of a platform in between. Now, that platform could be a light touch platform or a full stack platform. It depends on the category, but there is immense value to be created. And the difference, though, is that I think bulk of the B2B commerce companies that got created in India were very thin layer or very low value addition B2B commerce platforms, which in effect means they are supply chain financing companies. You really need to step deep into the supply chain stack for you to be able to solve the B2B commerce problem in India. And I think some of the companies which are solving it are seeing great results.
There have been a number of success stories: Udaan, Razorpay, ShareChat, Oyo, etc. Just walk us through what the investment rationale was in some of those companies, how those investments have panned out for you.
I will say, I mean, look, irrespective of what is the successful outcome of a company, I think the investment thesis across companies remains fairly consistent for us. The first and the foremost of it is, who are the people you're getting into business with, right? I think we like to be in business with people who are super passionate about committing a very large part of their life to building a business. Right now, this is not a straight line journey, and therefore you need to be in business with a person who's, or a set of people who are willing to commit, to persevere and go through this, multiple cycles of ups and downs as it leads towards a successful outcome. And in each of the examples that you mentioned, I think that prominently stands out, right? I mean, if you take, Harshil and Shashank at Razorpay, or whether you take Ritesh at Oyo, I think the most amazing thing you'll notice is that these people have continued to solve the problem in multiple ways over the course of many years. At which point of time you start seeing a large value creation happening. The second is you want to be in a business where the market is deep and growing. And the market is deep does not necessarily mean deep only from a top line standpoint, but enough profit pools should exist in the market. So if you look at hospitality as an example, we know within travel, the hospitality profit pool is significantly greater than the flight profit pool, and therefore, the chances that you could create a large value creation outcome here is much better. And the third is, is there a natural trend line or a tailwind which is helping these businesses take off prominently due to technology? And so I mean, in each of these examples, we have used the same sort of framework. When we've evaluated, we've gone in and we've continued to double down on most of these companies.
Okay. What about the outlook then on the entire space as a whole, on new age tech companies as well? We've seen a huge boom in the primary markets. A lot of companies have made their debut, a lot of big hits as well. What have you made of some of the companies that have recently listed in terms of the overall valuation, in terms of the pricing of the IPOs, etc.? Just would be interesting to get in your thoughts as well.
Sure. Look, I think it was just yesterday or maybe a couple of days back that there was news that the market cap of all the stocks on BSE has crossed $4 trillion. I believe there is a very distinct maturing of the primary markets, which is visible to us. Enough and more investors across different investing classes are now believing and investing behind equity more broadly. And this is not just limited to foreign investors coming in. This is also a large chunk of this is also driven by domestic institutions, domestic retail investors, so on and so forth. So I would say first from a macro level, I think there is very clear evidence that our primary markets are maturing and ready to take on a lot more new offerings. Second, when you think about specifically the more you could call them the more new age or digital companies which have done their public listings in the last, I would say, maybe 36 months, you will see that each of these companies are solving for a very large India-specific problem, right? Whether you think about Zomato doing it for food and now grocery, or you look at Mamaearth creating brands for New Age India, or you look at Paytm and so on and so forth. I think the clarity is that the Indian markets are welcoming and rewarding people who are solving very India-specific problems, as opposed to replicas of sort of global models. That many people did build. Now, whether the valuation is fair or not, I think markets are the best judge of that, and you see that it is though a new phase of maturing for each of these founders and for these companies, because there is now you've got to be ready for a deeper scrutiny. You've got to be on top of predictable growth. So all of these people will go through that journey, but I think it's fantastic to see this. Congrats to all of them. And we've had one of these cases in the past as well, where Indian Energy Exchange (IEX) was a company we were a very early investor in, went on to do an IPO and grew remarkably after that. So we believe this is here to stay and will only grow from here.
So what's going to be the next big focus area for the year ahead, the promising sectors, the sectors that you believe will really stand out and shine in India?
Right. I think 2024 has two elements to it. One is, how things shape up from private capital standpoint, which is where we play, and B, from what kind of sectors should we be investing in. If you were to look at private capital as a whole, the numbers look very different versus where they were last year. But the real picture of that is visible in the detail. I would say at the early stage where companies are being born, seed to Series B sort of investing, the market continues to be very active. There is enough capital that is available to be deployed in the market. And so therefore, this is really probably the best time for many, many founders who have deep conviction in their idea to go in and start building, right? This is not a time where there is momentum investing happening. This is a lot more, deliberate, thought through and, high conviction investing that is happening, which is why, investors like us believe this is a great time and a great vintage to be building as an investment portfolio in the country. So that's one from a capital standpoint. Things are relatively, I would say, still slower on the growth side, but we do believe that perhaps by mid next year things should start changing there as well. From a sector standpoint, I would say that we are consistent in our investment thesis. So as I outlined, there are three broad areas where we will invest. One is India to the world, which primarily is SaaS, but also things like content, commerce, marketplaces. The second would be local consumption, specifically Bharat oriented. And the third would be, all things AI, which would include things starting from foundational models upwards. Interestingly, in the last couple of years, we've got, what you would call sort of an emerging set of themes. These are themes which are still young enough, but we believe there is a trend line here, and therefore a lot more companies will be built. This would include things like climate, electric mobility, and so on and so forth. Very early in their stages of evolution, but we do believe there are many interesting companies being born here.